City News on TV Rotorua is proudly brought to you by Rotorua Central.
Good evening, Rotorua. Tonight on City News, St Faith's Church is set to mark 100 years at their present site. The International Big Brother Big Sister program has launched in town, and Conservation Week starts tomorrow with DOC challenging locals to get outdoors. St Faith's Church is celebrating 100 years at their present Ohinimutu site tomorrow, with the milestone also marking the bicentenary of Christianity in New Zealand. Reverend Tom Puata says the celebration event will include the 80-voice Aotearoa National Māori Choir and a number of solo performances. A tribute to Reverend Ihaya Ta'ahu, who established the first Ohinimutu church to carry the St Faith's name, will also be a part of the day.
They were inspired enough to build this building, and I think we ought to be grateful for that. The people who have come through these doors, not necessarily these ones behind me, but who have come into this place over those 100 years, the list reads like the A-list of Rotorua history, really.
We have the full interview with Reverend Tom Puata coming up later in the program. The world's largest mentoring program, Big Brothers Big Sisters, has launched in Rotorua. The first stage of the program will focus on recruiting volunteer mentors. Rotorua coordinator Daryl Parker says that they have already received a number of volunteer applicants. However, most were women, and they were now seeking men who would like to sign up to become a Big Brother mentor.
Really happy with the number of women inquiring. It seems like they're keen to volunteer and make themselves available, but the men may be, for different reasons, a bit slow coming forward.
The young people who receive one-on-one time through the program are among New Zealand's most vulnerable, and in 2012 over 700 children and young people aged between 6 and 18 years had their lives enriched by the support of a carefully screened and trained Big Brother or Big Sister mentor. We will air the full interview with Daryl Parker next week. In the meantime, if you'd like more information on the program or becoming a mentor, you can contact Daryl at the Rotorua Police Station. In sport tonight, as part of this year's Conservation Week, which starts tomorrow, the Department of Conservation is challenging the Rotorua public to get outdoors and discover local treasures by completing the DOC Jubilee Challenge. To complete the challenge, make your way on foot from the Mount Nongataha car park, which is 5 minutes up Paradise Valley Road from the Clayton Road intersection, and up to the Jubilee track to Mountain Road. The DOC Jubilee Challenge will run throughout Conservation Week, which is on till the 9th of November. And on Sunday, the Tikatapu Trail Run is on. Based at Tikatapu Blue Lake, the trail run has a choice of 3 distances, so there's something for all abilities, from the recreational walker to the competitive runner. The event starts off at 8 a.m. For more information, visit the website tikataputrailrun.co.nz. To your weather update now. Tonight there'll be fine spells with westerlies and an overnight low of 9. And we have a full forecast of the weekend's weather coming up after City News, thanks to Met Service. For program listings or to watch City News again, visit our website tvrotorua.co.nz, and remember to look us up on Facebook. Coming up after the break, we hear from Reverend Tom Puata about tomorrow's St Faith's celebrations, and we have a 2-part interview with Francis Piles from Grow Rotorua, who talks about their current focus, including details about the recent involvement in a SPA conference and how that has helped future areas of growth for the city.
So coming up is the centennial celebration for St Faith's Church here at Ohinimutu. Familiar face next to me, Reverend Tom Puata. Reverend, it's lovely to see you here in your workplace, actually.
Thank you, and thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Good to have you.
We usually have you out in the community, of course, and we get a lot of footage of you, but it's quite nice to be here in your work establishment, so thank you. So there is 100 years coming up of celebrating the church down here at Ohinamatu. What is that going to look like? Give us a rundown of what you imagine the day to be like.
I would imagine it's going to be a day of reflection for those people for whom this place is still a living, breathing expression of faith. That's what it's really about. It's the opportunity for us to give thanks at our normal Sunday service for the contribution that this building has made, and not the building particularly itself, but the people who've contributed to it, those who founded it, those who brought the faith here in the first place in Oihi in 1814, Reverend Samuel Marston, right through the whole of church history, regardless of whichever faith people are connected to. It's all a part of the warp and weft of our modern New Zealand society. So it's something worth remembering, and I think the faithful here will want to mark this occasion, the 100th year since, or the 100th year since the dedication of this building in 1914. So it's important for us. The building itself doesn't have a personality, I don't think, but because it is the work of human hands and human imagination and expression of love toward God, then it does hold a special place in many people's hearts. In earlier days, when the faith was much stronger, at least in terms of people's attending church, this was one of the main foci or focuses of community life here in Ohinamatu. Long before the days of manicured lawns and council-supplied guttering, when the place was a real living, breathing, take us as you see us type community. They were inspired enough to build this building. And I think we ought to be grateful for that. The people who have come through these doors, not necessarily these ones behind me, but who have come into this place over those 100 years, the list reads like the A-list of Rotorua history, really, from all of the community, not just Māori, not just particular tribes and sub-tribes, but people of the common tribe of God. That's what we're celebrating. And giving thanks to him, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So St. Faith's is only one of about 4 throughout the country, is that correct? And with it being a St. Faith church, it makes it quite special then.
It is special on a world scale. There are more than 4 St. Faiths in the world. There are only, I think probably at last count, only about 12 to 20, I think, around the world. Many of them, of course, are in Europe. St. Faith was a French martyr long before the advent of the Reformation and the separation of the Roman Catholic Church and the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. She's celebrated because of her commitment to the faith. Very difficult now to use the expression St. Faiths in a Māori context without using sort of other terms like hato, whakapono and all those sorts of things. So we stick with te hahi o te whakapono, the Church of the Faith virtually. But it is originally, the intention was to name it for St. Faith of France.
How long have you been here for? You say that you have said that the church doesn't have a personality, but you do. So therefore, do you bring that through in your sermons? Do you bring a different style of sermon?
I think one of the things about sermonising or preaching is that the personality of the speaker is as important as the message being delivered. If you're droll and boring, you've lost people for a start, and people these days are much more demanding of their public figures in that sense, and they won't put up with it. The old days of hellfire and brimstone, while they were wonderful in the day, that level of interaction between preachers and their flock certainly wouldn't go down these days, and that's entirely appropriate. That's the evolution of society, the growth of philosophy in a general sense, rather than just a bunch of rules and regulations which one person, the vicar, the priest, sort of administers and dispenses according to his will and his personality. Personality is an important part of it, because people have such freedoms now, the freedom of information, the freedom to think for themselves, the freedom to express their thinking and their being. That's something I think that religion does so very poorly today, is to allow people to be, when really that's the basis of all worldviews, regardless of who or where you are.
So the celebration is for the people of God, whether you be black, white, purple, brown, or whatever.
Yeah. It's really a thank you to God.
Yeah.
And every faith It doesn't matter what particular kind of faith it is or how it's expressed. Every faith is thankful, I would think, to God. So it's giving thanks to God. Incidentally, human beings are involved, but nothing can happen from a human point of view unless we connect it with other human beings.
So for the community that would like to come along and to help celebrate in the glory of God, what day and what time?
People are welcome. On Sunday at 9 a.m, the service will begin. It'll be presided over by our bishop, the diocesan bishop, Bishop Ngārahu Kātene, who has been around here for many, many years, long before me. And I hope that it will be a peaceful, quiet reflection on these past 100 years, and yet hopeful and optimistic for the next 100. None of us will be around to see it, but maybe they'll get something out of it.
Wow, changing the face and the language of the church. Thank you so much, Tom.
You're welcome.
Grow Rotorua helps to facilitate the economical growth of the Rotorua community. Here to talk to us about that is the Grow Rotorua Chief Executive Officer, Francis Powell. Francis, thank you so much for allowing us to pop in and catch up with you.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about Grow Rotorua. What's the main reason we have an organisation like this in the community?
Okay, so it's common for most towns, cities around the world, around New Zealand, around Australia, to have an entity that's focused on economic development and doing what it can to facilitate the growth of the economy and hence investment in the local economy and creating jobs for its people.
So what's the main focus currently of Grow Rotorua?
We're focused on 4 key sectors, which is the tourism, the forestry, wood processing, geothermal, agriculture, but we also have international education in there, and we're also doing some work on a freshwater centre of excellence.
What's your involvement with Spa City?
Huge. That arguably is our real key number 1 lead project. It's the one that we've invested the most time and money into. We've teamed up with a group from Australia called the Hot Springs Alliance Group, and between us we've facilitated research across 16 countries, 104 facilities, 140 operators, and so built a phenomenal body of knowledge and contacts, which now we can actually use that information and translate that into commercial developments for Rotorua.
Okay, so for all those in the community that may not know what Spa City means, okay, give us a picture. What is this? What is Spa City?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question because people talk about spa, but it means so many different things. Our key focus here is more around the hot springs element of it, which has been part of the history here for something like 150 years. So it's nothing new, but it's a really big growth industry. It's the fastest growing industry in the whole tourism sector around the world. It's worth about 50 odd billion dollars. Very, very big in places like Japan and China, but increasing in other countries. And so a true spa city, like, you know, we see them in Germany and we see them in France and Hungary and places like that, where they have access to geothermal water and they've been bathing there since, you know, prehistoric times, particularly around the Roman baths and that. So a real spa city would cater to a lot of different, let's call it market segments, but segments, demographics of the population, you know, not just tourists.
Okay, so is this health focused or is this more about luxury?
Both, all of those, yeah. And so when we look at the markets, you know, there are people that come for the real luxury pampering side of it, as I call it, the marble and glass aspect. There are the big family complexes. Hammer Springs is the best one that I know of that we've got in the country, also Wairua up in Auckland. You have the free ones like Kerosene Creek, Hot and Cold Creek. You have the ones up in the luxury lodges like Treetops, you know. You've got the medical side like QE, you know, ones that are catering to local people and tourists like Polynesian Spa, Hell's Gate. So it's a real broad range, but it means that you've got world-class facilities, or recognised as being, world-class.
Now, you did mention a couple of free ones, which was Hot and Cold and Kerosene Creek.
Yes.
What are the future of those spots? Are they still going to be accessible without having to pay a cent for it?
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so, and that's up to the landowners and the administrators of that. I think if I have it correctly, I see dock signs down by Kerosene Creek, and they're fabulous, and they're a key part of this whole thing, because we might have someone come in and spend $200 or $300 at a luxury spa and then go and check out Kerosene Creek the next day just because it's there, or the ones over on Lake Rotorua, which is much more economical entry price, which is great. So we've got this whole range of different things that you could do, and what we want to do is create like a resort, a destination resort, so that conjures up the image that people would come and stay maybe 3, 4, 5 days a week, not just pop in and out for a couple of hours into a pool.
Right, well, because we've got so much to talk about, we will cut to a break and we'll come right back. So we won't be too far away, and we'll be back soon. So we're back with Frances Powell from Grow Rotorua. Frances, let's talk about the recent trip to Morocco.
Sure.
Why was that trip important?
Well, that's part of the Global Spa and Wellness Summit, and there were 4 of us went last year to India and started to understand and make the connections and start to build that network and access the research that organisation has done. This year there was an opportunity, because hot springs are really increasing in that whole space. They've largely been spa focused, which, as I said, is the marble and glass and pampering, and tend to be in a hotel environment. But they've now realised that just how big this hot spring sector is and how profitable it can be as well. So it was a real opportunity to put hot springs and to put Rotorua on that global industry map. Yeah.
Right. So it's adding it to there. Now let's talk about, because you said profitable. So let's talk about the benefits then for Rotorua. Yeah. Let's talk about the benefits not only for the business sector, but also for us in the community, just the people. What are the benefits?
Yeah, sure. Well, the key thing is, if we look at a complex over on Mornington Peninsula near Melbourne, they have 400,000 people a year going through. They have 200 staff, so it's that's a lot of job creation. If you look at Hanmer Springs, they have about 100 staff on their books. So these are, the first thing is they create a lot of jobs. The second thing is that the geothermal resources tend to be on Maori-owned land, so there's an opportunity for them to develop those resources and invest in the businesses, and particularly if they're locally owned, then the profits and what have you come back here. But you also get a multiplier off it, so it's not just someone going in the gate and paying an entry fee. They stay here and they consume food and they go and do other things. So there's generally quite a big multiplier off it. And plus, what it does do is it helps to lift and change the perception of Rotorua as a place to come to, because if people had been here several years ago, they would come back and go, well, what's different? Well, we've got something world class. Yeah.
Okay, so it really is about growing Rotorua. What is it going to look like? Okay, are we going to see new establishments popping up around the place? Are we going to see that each of these establishments specialise in a different area of spa treatment? Yeah. Explain to us, what is it going to look like?
Yes to all your guesses. So the key thing is to look at the market, because we don't want to oversaturate the market, understand where the gaps are. So the gaps at the moment that we identify are very much in that what we would call the international hot spring spa experience is one. Another one is around the family market, where when the kids can scream and run and play and things like that. We see places like down in Taupo and over in Napier cater to that market. They work really, really well. The other one is at I guess I'd call it the sort of eco resort level. You have other applications which tend to be on the golf course. Golf tourism is another big one. So that's more about the accommodation and the food and beverage and a bit of pampering. So we've looked at the market and what we have and what the gaps are, and now have an understanding of what we need to be working on.
Because would you say that it's a hugely untapped resource here, the natural hot waters that are coming up from under the ground?
Definitely. From what we've seen overseas and what's been developed, you know, and what could be tapped into, we're not even scratching the surface, you know. And I think the other great thing is that we have a flow of over 3 million visits a year. Not individual visitors, but there's a huge market coming here already who are not utilising, you know, the facilities that are available. Yeah.
Okay, well, that really explains, you know, using that natural resource in a business sense to grow economical. But how about us locals? Because we don't have access to that. That's something in which we could save just in our individual homes. What are your views on that?
You mean in terms of geothermal heating homes? Yeah, well, we'd love to see more of that. The key thing is you really sort of need to be sitting on or near geothermal is the first thing. The bores that were shut down within the radius of Pahutu geyser and that was done several years ago. But we did have a look at this, but it's about roughly sort of $20,000 to fit out a house, and so that capital cost, like solar heating and insulation, all those things, that's the sort of single biggest barrier to seeing it develop further. So if we can find a creative way of either a new development or people accessing it.
Thank you so very much for having us come up and giving us locals the heads up on what's happening in our city and what we look forward to seeing. Thank you.
That was Frances Powles from Grow Rotorua talking with Melanie Groves. To watch the show again or to catch up on past episodes of City News, you can visit our website tvrotorua.co.nz, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook to stay up to date with our news headlines. Thanks for joining us tonight. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. Por Maria.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.
City News on TV Rotorua was proudly brought to you by Rotorua Central.